it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I'm looking forward to delving into your world and your work, so thank you.
Well, that's great. I'm always happy to meet new people, get new questions, be taken by surprise.
Yeah,
So
we'll do our best here. I got to say, before we get in, I am actually about a quarter of the way through a book with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. It was a set of conversations. You know about that book?
I know about the book. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
actually read it, but yeah, I
It's
understand.
amazing. It's
Uh,
really cool the relationship they had, the way that they've kind of bridged these theological gaps that humans kind of put up, and how they've embraced each other and their separate
yeah,
ideologies. It's pretty cool.
that's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, I want to begin our journey before we get into your work by asking you this. 5 years ago, this global pandemic was raging, so many unknowns, so many things changed. Ultimately, how did you survive the global pandemic and how has it reverberated into what you do today?
Gosh. Well, I was a monk for 8 years. I'm basically an introvert.
Yeah.
So the pandemic shutdown, I hate to say this, but it was sort of blessing.
Yeah.
It enabled me to withdraw even more and really get down to the core of what I do. And it was, I went back to my origins in many ways. But I was holed up here with my wife, Caroline. She has multiple sclerosis, so she's also very limited physically. So we're used to being alone together in our house, but we also have a very active work relationship. She's a life coach, and I teach mindfulness and I coach mindfulness as well. So in that sense, it really gave us an additional focus, and it also gave us the opportunity to really move towards online services because I was teaching. I was going around Montreal renting different venues and teaching from there 10-week, 12-week courses. Whereas now I teach on Zoom, um, which back then was not practical, but now everybody's comfortable with it. So in that sense, it really changed where I teach from. I teach from here, but especially what happened is it changed the continuity because instead of teaching 4 or 6 or 8 week courses, I now teach regularly 3 times a week, every week without fail. And that gives people uh, the hardest part of meditation is doing it. It's continuity. If you don't keep it up, it doesn't really help much. It's practice. So that's really been the end result. It's made me more comfortable being online. It's made my students be more comfortable in this venue. So that was a very good thing. But there's a lot of other stuff which has come with and since the pandemic, which is incredibly stressful for everybody. Um, and yeah, that's changed the way that I teach in some ways, and also what people are looking for.
That's an interesting point on meditation. It's kind of like an antibiotic. You can't take it for a few days. You got to run its course. You got to
Yeah,
take it. You know what I'm saying? It's like I've never really heard it put that way. It makes sense to me. It's like anything. If you want to be a better writer, you want to run a marathon, you want to do these things, you can't just pop in and do it when you feel like it. You have to
no,
do it and you have to power through. Not that you have to power through a meditation, but it's a regular thing that's going to, reap results because of regularity.
it's often compared to working out.
Yeah.
You work out your arm, it's going to get strong.
Yeah,
Simple. You stop working out, it's going to get weak.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And the muscle you're training is attention.
Yeah,
And attention right now is under attack from all directions. Our
certainly
attention is
is.
being fragmented by everything.
It certainly is. So I want to
Mm.
get into the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. And the best way to do that is to put you in front of kids. Kids always, they're the truth serum. So what I'm
Yeah.
going to do is put you in front of 12-year-olds. It's career day. The kid in the back of the room is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
What I do for a living is I help people to live better, to appreciate what they've got, and not to get caught up in the rat race because what you're being taught in school is how to get through the system, how to succeed, mostly in financial ways. And there's a lot more to life than that. And I think you understand as a 12-year-old, you're just beginning to realize that life, well, it's terrifying and it's full of opportunity at the same time. So how do you negotiate that? How do you manage that? Is it just by doing your classwork, passing your exams, sticking to your group of friends? Or do you want to break out of that? Or is there a possibility to find more? Well, life is very mysterious and there's an enormous amount to discover. And this is your opportunity. It depends on your mindset. And this sort of practice is all about exploring yourself. When you explore yourself, you're exploring life. And then the sky's the limit.
So when you were 12 years old, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to get away from home. I
Okay.
wanted to escape.
Okay.
Um, home was, I didn't like it at home. It wasn't very good for me. My mother was very loving, very kind. My father was very stern, South Italian, Calabrese. He had all sorts of issues of his own, which I understand and I'm compassionate about, but I just wanted to get away. Um, I'd been raised very strictly as a Catholic, and I still had this sense that I wanted to be good. I don't know if that was the right word, but I wanted to do something with my life, and I didn't know what it was. And I sort of tried, I had tried to become, what a good Catholic boy is supposed to be, which is like a saint, right? And that really didn't work out for me at all. Completely backfired. So I realized that that path wasn't open to me. But I think what I realized apart from that in my own mind was that I really wanted to be an explorer. I was reading all these books. I was raised in England, so I was still reading those old stories from the British Empire and the great explorers of Africa, darkest Africa, and all this stuff. So I had my mind set on this, but of course I was 100 years too late.
Yeah.
Um, but what I did do and what I discovered I was doing was to become an explorer of the mind. And that really is a pretty good description for what I've done in my life. Um, Mindfulness is meditation is it can be many things and you can approach it in a very magical way, but if you approach it in a pragmatic way, understanding your own mind and how it works, that gives you an enormous advantage in everything in life. I wake up in the morning, I take a few minutes and I realize, hey Stephen, you're in a really crappy mood this morning. Now, at the beginning of the day I know I'm in a crappy mood, that's very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think you'll discover all sorts of other things as well. But I like to keep it practical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My dad's ancestors came from Italy to Ellis Island, and he was born in Brooklyn and raised in Long Island. And I'm thinking about that immigrant experience, that Italian background of what you're saying is that all you wanted to do was get out of the house. And sometimes people are like, how did a Dimino end up in Kansas City? And my dad, all he wanted to do was get out of the house. He
Mhm.
that his desire when he got to that point, he joined the military, got in the Air Force, got stationed in Kansas City, fell in love, and here we are. But he had the same thing. When I think about, what I wanted to do and what my dad wanted to do, you think about your family and what they wanted to do. All he wanted to do was what you said. I'd never put those dots together, but I think sometimes that immigrant experience can be something that will shape and mold depending on how it's manifested in the kids in the house.
Oh, I think so. My dad wanted to get away too. He ran away to the circus.
Okay.
He spent his life, he became a lion tamer.
Okay.
It was a big, big success in Europe back in the day. Um, but yeah, he wanted to get away from home. And I, he wasn't the only Italian. This was in between the wars, so he was sort of grossed out by Mussolini, and he didn't want to fight for Mussolini. And there was this desire. He was embarrassed by his background. He was embarrassed to be Italian. He didn't want to speak Italian anymore. Um, and I think that was true of a lot of people, but it seems to be true even without the Mussolini connection. There's still a lot of Italians feel a little bit embarrassed about where they came from, even though, you know, from a tourist point of view, it's the best country in the world.
Yeah.
But as a place to live, my sister still lives in Rome. Um, it's a complicated country to live in, you know.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, and also too, there's that American stereotype of the mafia and all of that. And my
yeah,
dad used to always dissuade me from any of those um, pictorials of the Italian heritage on the big screen. And he
yes.
used to always tell me in regards to the mafia, don't ever piss in the river because you never know when you have to drink out of it. He used to always tell me that, and that was kind of the adage of that whole glorification of that culture. And I
Yeah.
think that was one thing that he always wanted to distance himself from, because he looked like Luca Brasi from The Godfather. Like he had that look, and then you get kind of pigeonholed into that. But anyways, that's another complexity of the Italian ancestry as well, especially in America.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, I grew up in England, as I say, and the main feature of my Italianness was that I was Catholic. Catholics and amount to less than 10% of the English population, and most of them are Irish anyway. So I grew up with most of my school friends were Irish, my teachers were Irish. I grew up in a completely isolated Catholic world until I was a young man. 10, 12, that's when I started seeing that there were other ways of being and other ways of believing and all of that stuff. And that was an eye opener. But until then, yeah, it was a pretty claustrophobic experience. My first experience of Italian culture was my dad took me to a couple of Italian weddings in England. And, all that food, all those people, all the kissing, all the hugging, I just felt like, oh, it's too much. I can't take it.
yeah, yeah,
I've been anglicized, turned
yeah.
into cold, distant, sort of
Yeah, sure, sure.
withdrawn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I saw growing up. So let me ask you this. Who's been kind of a role model? Who's been an inspirational force for you to become who you are today?
Well, this is going to sound weird, but my father, um, he wasn't a great father. He was a really interesting man. He was one of those people who everybody loves. He knows how to entertain. In his later life, he had a restaurant and he was a great entertainer. He was a great host. But to his family, he was a different man. And there was a lot of resentment there. But his background, his determination, his courage, they always inspired me. And I feasted on his photographs from before I was born. Between the two wars, he had all these publicity shots, and there was him with the lions, him with different acts, and in the circus tents, and all over Europe and in South America, and it was just really exciting. And he wouldn't tell us any stories. He refused to talk about his past. He was very embarrassed. So I took these pictures and I projected onto them what I wanted to see, I guess.
Wow.
So when I was 21 and I was coming to the end of my college, and I was faced with the prospect of really, really boring employment, I realized that, Stephen, you can do whatever the hell you want. That's what your dad did. That's what your mum did. Mum ran away to join the circus too.
Interesting.
So yeah, that was the role model, and that's what inspired me. Yeah.
When I was in high school, I was really I hit that point of being a born again Christian. I remember I was outside of a skate rink when I was in the eighth grade, and a
Mhm.
kid told me like how long hell would last and how painful it would be, and I just got this absolute wall of what death was and our mortality, and it freaked me out. And it
Yeah.
was a good move to really kind of come to a theological crossroads because I didn't grow up with spirituality. But I remember, especially in high school, my grandmother used to say, you could be a priest. You could get into the church and do this. And as the older I got, I thought the only thing that I would ever be able to probably consciously do that would make me feel good would to lean on the Buddhist teachings, to lean on being a monk. And that's my lead in here to you. How does that happen? How do you get to a point like emotionally and psychologically where you decide that's your path and you get into that world? How did that happen for you?
Well, there's the intellectual, the mental side of it. I was reading a lot of Alan Watts, and that sort of guided me into thoughts of Eastern religion. There's the cultural side of it. The Beatles went off to India and sat at the feet of the Maharishi. Um, so that sort of made it allowed. It was like it wasn't so weird. You could
Yeah.
sort of do it. And then there was my own personal issue, which was I was mortally um, what's the word? Embarrassed, shy, scared of women. And my sex life was just awful. My love life was non-existent. And this was during the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
Um, and I finally came to the conclusion that this is not going to work. This is just too painful for me because I was good looking. So I always attracted girls. But from there on, it was a disaster. I didn't know how to deal with it. I wasn't good with people. I was very introverted still. So that became a firm decision. Well, you know what? Maybe I should take a vow of celibacy and then all this will go away. It didn't go away, but I tried.
Yeah. Right.
But when I came out, those years somehow transformed me and I gained confidence and my life changed because my sex life changed because
Sure.
believe it or not. And my love life, my ability to communicate with people. And that's what the monastery did for me. It gave me this transition from being chronically, severely introverted and scared of people to becoming at least confident and beginning to socialize and connect to people. Um, so it was a great experience. But of course, I mean, being a monk is a different thing for every monk. Um, I thought I was going into a quiet place where I'd spend my life in solitude, and it turned out to be very busy, noisy, raucous, competitive place. Not what I expected at all. But in the end, good for me because
Yeah.
probably because it wasn't what I expected.
A crossroads. So let me ask you this. Growing up Catholic, I'm curious,
Mm,
because you probably never lose the tenets of that world that you came from. Have you
mm.
been to the Vatican in Rome?
Yeah.
How does it feel to you? How did it feel?
Oh,
Huh?
gross,
Yeah.
gross.
But I
It's
mean, like,
it's too big. It's
yeah,
too material.
yeah. It
Yeah.
it is fascinating though, St. Peter's Square. I went to in high school. I had a pen pal that was in a town south of Florence, so I
Uh-huh.
went over alone in my 20s.
Yeah.
Going through the lyra and the language and figuring everything out. And Rome was absolutely beautiful. If there was ever a part of me that felt like I was reincarnated, there's some kind of pull to my lineage that goes to Rome. Rome just felt
Mm,
comfortable. It felt like home. But I remember towards the end of my Rome trip, I walked through St. Peter's Square at dusk and looked at all the statues and saw a Vivaldi concerto and saw an operatic singer, and it was just absolutely magical. I guess I
uh-huh.
was taking it in from a very visceral standpoint, trying to connect the dots of my
Mm.
Italian ancestry, and it just felt comfortable. But it is a monstrosity. It is definitely something that it's big. It's quite a
Yeah.
thing.
Well, by the time I first saw Rome, I already had a big chip on my shoulder with
Yeah,
the Catholics. So that, that prefigured the way I was looking at it.
yeah,
But well, no, it's magnificent as well, for sure. And
yeah.
and later on, as I became a student of history. I'm really interested in history. Um, and I discovered that in the first millennium, that the Catholic Church was really that's what created peace in the ruins of the Roman civilization. It brought the different tribes and countries of Europe together and established the, Pax Romana. It was very impressive. And
Yeah,
I began to appreciate the accomplishments of the church. And then I saw, what happens when institutions get old.
yeah, that's true.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
So let me ask you this. What is the motivator every day for you to wake up to do the work that you do, to help people, to lead them to a better place? What is that motivation for you?
Nothing feels better than actually the sense that you've helped somebody in some way.
Yeah,
Um, and especially if it's something, I hate to use the word spiritual. I really don't like this idea that spirituality and materialism are two separate things. They're
yeah,
not. We live in our bodies, for God's sake,
yeah,
for God's sake. Um, but Um, I'm sorry, I lost my trail.
We were talking about what motivates you to wake up and
What
every day.
motivates me? The ability to help somebody in any way at all is absolutely the most satisfying thing of all. I don't know what else to say. I teach the people who come to my class, they come from all sorts of different backgrounds. Some really want, they're very formal about it and they want to learn meditation and they want to achieve a high state of consciousness. And some people, it's just that their lives are falling apart and they need some reference point. Or they've heard my voice on the radio and they think they can trust me. So you never know where people are going to come from. But my motivation is to help people trust and rely on themselves.
Yeah,
This is absolutely the most important thing because that's where all your power lies or doesn't lie. Um, and I've also dealt with a lot of people who are coming out of Buddhism in the realization that it isn't working for them. It wasn't what they expected. The teachers are more institutional than they thought. And so they're coming to a new way of looking at it. And they don't want to leave it all behind, but there's a lot of stuff they can't believe. So I've been able to help people like that as well, because that's what I went through. When I left the monastery, I was tortured by guilt and self-doubt and yet at the same time I knew I had to do it. It was time to move on. I wasn't a Tibetan. I'm not here to teach Tibetan culture. I'm trying to find something more substantial. So yeah, to help people to give people another angle on themselves, help them look at themselves in a new light. And that's what we do in mindfulness. But you sit down and you watch this moment. You're not just looking at the breath, same old breath every day. It's different every day. What's going on right now?
yeah,
Celebrate it. I'm drinking a cup of coffee. Well, what's the coffee taste like? Well, I wasn't really paying attention. Well, actually, it tastes fantastic. You know,
yeah,
bring your attention to what you're doing.
yeah.
Changes the world. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, ran to that 12-year-old version of you that was ready to get out of the house and go somewhere else with your life, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived, the wisdom you've accumulated over the years, what advice would you impart?
Advice. I'm very careful with advice. I don't know. What would I say to me? Trust yourself. Um, Life is bigger than you think.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's
But
it.
yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
The simplicity of it's profound in its own right. So, of everything that you've done and evolved into on this journey in your life, what are you the proudest of? No, pride can be an ugly word, but what are you the happiest that has happened in your life?
I would go with the word pride. I think the thing I'm most proud of is leaving the monastery. It was when I arrived with the Tibetans, I was a wreck. I was coming down from morphine addiction. My life was a disaster, and I bumped into the Tibetans, and they welcomed me with open arms, and I had a place to belong, and I fit in. And then everything came together. I started learning. I started trusting, believing in myself, and it was good. So that was when my life seemed to begin. But then 8 years later, I realized that it had come to an end. All of that was true. What I'd gotten from it was real and it was substantial, but now it was time for me to change. And in the meantime, I'd become a part of this huge 2,600-year-old institution, which promised that I would become a great teacher to people and I would help other sentient beings escape the sufferings of life. And it was this incredible, vast religious vision of it's huge. Um, and leaving that behind and realizing, well, I'm just another guy and I'm just doing my shit. And, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And I was back to plain reality. It's like stepping out of a color movie back into a black and white movie.
Yeah,
And that transition was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
interesting.
Um, Lasted almost 20 years. I went through two awful marriages. Um, I was thrashing about in life. But by the time those 20 years was over, I realized I'd been able to use the tools that I learned in the monastery. And it took that long for them to actually bear fruit. But I did it. And that's what gives me, those are my real credentials. It's not being the monk for 8 years, it's leaving the monk. That's what gave me the real credentials to be able to help people go through their stuff.
Yeah.
And it gave me insights into the human condition and all that stuff. And I also had a framework to put it in because the teaching of the Buddha is very coherent, it's very consistent, and it's very different from Buddhism. You've got Christ and Christianity, you got Buddha and Buddhism.
Yeah.
They're different.
Yep. They
So
certainly
you've got to
are.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. At the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, everyone that you teach, everyone that knows you, clients, but you run the show. What is your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I told you I like tough questions, didn't I?
I took you to task.
Who do I think? Who the hell do you think
Who
you
do
are?
you think you are?
Um, well, I guess I'm a bit of an iconoclast. I'm an explorer. Um, I'm a much more ethical person than I ever expected to be. I believe in right and wrong. I don't believe it's always clear, but I think you should always look for it and try and uncover it. And yeah, and remember that it changes, that everything is changing. Everything you believe, everything you see, everything you think you know, it's one thing today and it's something else tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I guess I see myself as somebody who's trying to be fluid, trying to be intelligent, trying to hold as few opinions and views as possible because the Buddha spoke a lot of not a lot actually, he spoke a little bit of the end of views. He considered viewpoints, opinions to be baggage,
Yeah.
um, beliefs. And as much as possible, I've tried to shed them. I try and keep my beliefs to a minimum, try and keep my points to my opinions to a minimum. And at the same time, I try and be ethical and moral in my life. And so I think some things you need to believe in. I believe in empathy. I believe in compassion, believe in kindness. Um, and that's who I'm trying to be. But it's a moving target.
Yeah.
So
I
still
get it.
trying.
I get it. So if anyone wants to reach out, tune in, they have questions, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place to go?
Well, I am known as the Inner Monk. So you can go to theinnermonk.com. You can also use my family name, Schettini.com. It's the same website. And you'll see that I teach 3 times a week, so you can join my classes there. They're 3 half-hour sessions, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Um, and the idea is, I say, I'm teaching not Buddhism per se, but I use Buddhism a lot. But the important point here is the continuity and the community. There's a group of people who are like you, they're struggling. These are the ways we think about and approach life. We take this focus of mindfulness. The goal is self-reliance. We're not into gurus. We're not into belief as an end in itself. It's all about discovery. Yeah.
Wonderful. Stephen, grazia. Buon fortuna. I appreciate it. Best of luck. This has been illuminating. Thank you for being open. Thank you for your story.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's a real pleasure.
Best of luck. Thank you.
Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.